I'm Kevin Cox, and today I'm going to go over 7 great alternatives to Alcoholics Anonymous and the other 12-step groups. I will share specifically what these programs are about, their approach to beating addiction, and the main comparisons between these programs and 12-step programs. Each of these programs have been proven to work and have been growing over the past few years. In the description below, I'll also leave you guys a link of where to find each of these programs. Number 1, Smart Recovery. Smart Recovery is probably one that everyone has already heard of and is the next biggest name in recovery to 12-step groups. SMART stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. Their approach is teaching its members self-empowerment and self-reliance. They encourage individuals to recover and live satisfying lives. They give their members the tools and techniques for self-directed change. Their meetings are educational and include open discussions. They advocate for the appropriate use of prescribed medications and psychological treatments. Their programs evolve as science and knowledge of addiction and recovery evolves. Their 4-point program involves building and maintaining motivation, coping with urges, managing thoughts and feelings and behaviors, and living a balanced life. In comparison to 12-step groups, they have no sponsors. Unlike AA and NA sponsors, you must be a facilitator to run a Smart Recovery group, which does require training and coaching to become one. SMART teaches its members that addiction is something people can overcome and move on with their life. They do not teach their members that they suffer from a lifelong illness that requires making meetings for the rest of their life. SMART teaches its members how to think for themselves and how to become independent rather than codependent. You don't need a sponsor to help make decisions for you. SMART's methods and approaches to beating addiction is based off of science and cognitive behavioral therapy, rather than 12 steps, spirituality, and divine intervention. SMART also does not believe in negative labels. Members do not label themselves as addicts or alcoholics, unlike 12-step groups do. Number 2 is Secular Organizations for Sobriety. To get a good idea of what SOS is, I recommend watching their award-winning documentary, No God at the Bottom of the Glass. They believe in sobriety without superstition. However, they are not anti-spiritual. It is not a program only for atheists. They believe in giving individuals credit for their own progress and achievements in recovery as opposed to a higher power. SOS chooses to keep religion and spirituality separate from recovery. Their meetings are centered on the power of the individual to achieve sobriety, a big reason SOS also does not have sponsors. SOS encourages the scientific study of addiction in all of its aspects. It does not limit its outlook to one area and is constantly changing to stay up to date with any new scientific methods of treating addiction and compulsive behavior. As opposed to 12-step groups, SOS's approach is more individualized, based on each person's personal experience with addiction. Rather than 12-step groups covering all of its members with only one single way to get sober. Compared to the divine intervention and spiritual awakening that 12-step groups offer, SOS takes a more rational and realistic approach to recovery. Number 3, Lifering. Lifering emphasizes that you, the individual, do have the power to overcome your addiction. They support the efforts of strengthening the sober self and weakening the using self. They focus primarily on our current lives, not on the hurts and damages of the past. It is a secular program, removing itself from using spirituality and religion as a way to get sober. Lifering does have a very unique approach to getting its members sober. When it comes to addiction, they believe everyone has 2 voices going on in their head while in active addiction, their sober self and their using self. They believe in empowering and building one's sober self to drown out the voices of the using self. They focus on the promising future rather than bringing up their past experience of drugs and alcohol use. Lifering's philosophy is summarized in their 3 S's: sobriety, secularity, and self-help. Unlike 12-step groups, when you are expected to constantly bring up your past of drugs and alcohol, Lifering focuses on the present life and moving forward in life. Unlike 12-step groups requiring their members to admit full powerlessness to their addiction, Lifering focuses on empowering its members, that they themselves have the ability to beat addiction and strive for a better future. At number 4 is moderation management. Just like the rest of these other methods, moderation management teaches its members that they do have a choice in whether they use or not, avoiding the powerlessness concept. The program is based on behavioral change. Moderation for many is like the first step. They approach overcoming addiction by first controlling and limiting your addiction. By being able to control your alcohol intake, you can then rationally decide if you want to become fully abstinent or if you can manage it enough to drink like a normal human being again. The program provides information about alcohol and drugs, moderation drinking guidelines and limits, drinking monitoring exercises, goal-setting techniques, and self-management strategies. Unlike 12-step groups that push the mentality that members should live only for today, take no thought for tomorrow, moderation management teaches its members goal-setting techniques. The obvious difference here is that unlike 12-step groups that require complete abstinence to receive coins and key tags, this program only asks its members to limit, moderate, and control their intake. Number 5, Women for Sobriety. These are women-only support groups. Their methods and approach are grounded in supporting issues that majority of women face while actively using and the lifestyle that comes with it. Their approach revolves around the empowerment of women, building them up, removing themselves from dangerous and toxic environments of drug abuse. Many of the women recovering in these groups are also recovering from abuse, depression, domestic violence, rape, and so on. They focus on progress, not the past. They teach women not just how to live an ordinary life, but a great life. They, as all the other programs here, reject the 12-step powerless mentality. They promote giving women back their power and control. Again, rather than 12-step groups covering all of its members, male and female, with one approach, Women for Sobriety is a more individualized and custom approach specifically for women. Women sometimes have a much harder time relating to the 12-step program's defects of character. 12-step groups like to focus on its members' selfishness, when most women getting sober have problems with selflessness. Unlike 12-step groups teaching its members to settle for becoming a productive member of society, Women for Sobriety teaches their members to not just live an ordinary life, but to strive to have a remarkable life. Lastly, and most importantly, is a much safer environment for women to get sober in, both physically and mentally. Physically, you don't have to worry about convicted male sex offenders and hardened criminals being sentenced by court order into the same room as you and harassing you. Mentally, you don't have to worry about the slogans and actions of 13th stepping in 12-step groups, which they themselves have characterized as older, more senior members taking advantage of and sleeping with newer members. Number 6 is the Life Process Program. The program is based off of the most recent advances in medical science and practice. It follows all of the guidelines of beating addiction by understanding addiction. The program is completely online, and you do it from the comfort of your own home, rather than in overly expensive rehabs. It is a 6 to 16-week program that is self-paced. The course includes the true meaning of addiction and compulsive behavior. It teaches you how to outgrow your destructive habits. They use motivational interviewing, cognitive behavioral therapy, and community reinforcement and family therapy. Rather than 12-step groups trying to explain addiction and recovery with higher powers and supernatural remedies, the Life Process Program actually teaches its members how drugs and alcohol affect the brain, how to disconnect mental bad habits, and how to change your brain to outgrow addiction and move on to better things in life. Almost all 12-step meetings are speaker meetings, which means every meeting you must cope with listening to someone talk about their experience with drugs and alcohol. With the Life Process Program, you don't have to share your life history with drugs and alcohol with a group of strangers if you don't want to. The Life Process Program teaches you how to outgrow and move on from addiction, rather than 12-step groups that do nothing other than talk about drugs and alcohol. And at number 7, Rational Recovery. Rational Recovery is an abstinent-based program that does not view addiction as a disease. They take a more rational view on addiction, that a person can choose to stop using and can control cravings with the right mental mindset. To them, addiction is seen as the result of one's uncertainty between wanting to be sober and wanting to listen to the addictive chatter going on in the brain. The program works by promoting objective awareness of thoughts and triggers that cause cravings. Compared to 12-step groups, Rational Recovery believes in a more realistic and physical approach rather than 12-step groups using higher powers, divine intervention, and other supernatural remedies. Rational Recovery does not view addiction as a disease. Rather than 12-step groups that teach their members that they are powerless to temptations and urges, Rational Recovery teaches its members that they do have the power to not give in to temptation, that any individual can stop, think, and rationally make a decision to not use or drink. Now, an overall comparison to these programs I've just mentioned and 12-step groups. No other program but 12-step groups demands its members to admit full powerlessness to drugs and alcohol. All the other programs I just mentioned here change and develop new methods as medical science learns more. In almost 85 years of use, AA, the founder of these 12-step programs, has not changed its methods, steps, or practice at all. No other program but 12-step groups believe spirituality and happiness are the key to recovery. No other program but AA and NA have books, documentaries, news series, and movies all made specifically on the mistreatment of women in their rooms. No other program but 12-step groups demand that their members have a sponsor for life to help make decisions for you. All the other programs I have listed here teach their members how to grow and think for themselves. No other program but 12-step programs makes its members identify themselves as an addict or alcoholic. No other program here teaches its members that they suffer a lifelong and terminal illness to drugs and alcohol but 12-step groups. No other program but 12-step programs teaches their members that they need to make meetings for the rest of their life to keep their illness in remission. No other program defines drug abuse as a moral defect of character but 12-step programs. 12-step groups are the only groups that makes its members relive their past experience in active addiction. Every night, someone sharing their past experience with drugs and alcohol. No other program revolves their entire method and practice around drugs and alcohol. The other programs I have just named teach people to overcome their addiction and move on to better things in life. In conclusion, if you guys have any questions on finding or starting one of these groups, please feel free to message me. Starting more programs like these are what are going to start to make serious change. 12-step groups as the #1 solution have proven their effectiveness in communities as we continue to watch the records of overdoses and overdose-related deaths rise. Thank you.